You are very likely to be doing better than you think. But that doesn't mean there aren't a few prudent steps that you can make to really enhance your situation. Now, the fact that you're watching this means you're alive, I would imagine. And that means that you were born in the modern world. And that means you've won the lottery, because the chances of that happening are 1 in millions, particularly if you were born in the West. If we go back even as far as the 1800s, 80% of the population lived in extreme poverty. That's defined as under $2 a day in today's money. Fast forward to today, and the number of people in extreme poverty globally is less than 10%. So being alive now is a great time to be alive, particularly if you live in the West. Part of the problem, however, is psychological. Human beings don't look at the facts of their situation. They compare themselves to other human beings. It's relative. And we live in a world of very visible wealth. Millionaires, billionaires, although they account for a tiny proportion of the population. Now, the old adage goes that money doesn't make you happy. That's false. Money makes you happy up to the point that it makes you comfortable. The corpus of data shows that that number is about £33,000 in the UK per annum and about $75,000 in the US. After that, it's diminishing returns. The first problem is biological. If you are managing to defeat your central nervous system and progress, you're doing very well. The problem with the central nervous system is it's built for comfort. And that gives you anxiety and stress. That's where that comes from. And in order to progress, you need to be uncomfortable. And that keeps many people restrained. The way that you get around that is dopamine. It's setting goals which give you natural dopamine as you move towards them. Even by virtue of setting a goal itself will give you dopamine. And that dopamine will work with you as you push through the boundaries and progress. It's important to note here as well that this is a very important step, because what you're building is your engine. That is your career or your income. Now, I will say this in terms of your engine. It's in many cases the least important, because if you have a massive engine and you produce a massive income and you spend it all, you get nowhere. Where if someone has an average salary and they're very diligent, they will do a lot better. So it's the least important of the factors. If you don't believe that, then take a look at footballers once they retire, because an estimated 40% of footballers are broke within 5 years of retirement. Keith Gillespie spent £7.2 million and ended up bankrupt, filing with HMRC. So money, the engine, needs to be managed properly, regardless of how much you make. Coming back to the psychology, when you look at the world and you see the edge cases, like Elon Musk, for example, you almost need to rule them out, because once you take away the edge cases, it's actually not very difficult to do quite well. And here's the key facts on that. 25% of Americans spend more than they earn, and over a third of Brits. And over a third of the population in America and the UK have no savings at all. They have no contingency plan if anything goes wrong. They live paycheck to paycheck. If you are even saving a morsel every month, you're doing better than a third of the population already. So it doesn't take much, compounded over time, to really set yourself apart in the real world. The second problem, therefore, that if you're solving, you're doing very well, is one of organisation and diligence. If you even know what you spend every month, you're doing better than most people. And if you're saving some of that money and you're building up a cash pool for the future, then you're starting to do quite well. Now, there are no end to strategies here, but a common one is the 15-65-20 rule, which basically means if you imagine 3 buckets, one of them says 15%, that's for your savings. The second bucket, 65%, is for your basic needs like food and rent. And the last bucket is very important. That's your discretionary and or luxury spend. That's important because actually your lifestyle should go up over time. If you save everything, you won't have a very nice life, first of all. But actually, that bucket, that ability to spend more and enjoy yourself, is going to help push you forward as that grows over time. That is a dopamine hit as well. So you mustn't forget about that bucket and save everything. The third problem is using that 15% bucket correctly. Now, as that bucket starts to build up, don't touch it. Let it get to about 6 or 12 months expenses. And that's the emergency fund that you never touch unless you need it. After that, once it keeps building up, then you can start to look at debt. Now, debt is corrosive, and there's not all debt is born equal. Some debt is evil. For example, high interest credit card debt. So you start with your higher interest debt and begin paying that down. If you have a mortgage, and most of us do, you probably find there's an overpay facility, normally about 10%. You could start to chip away at that as well. So it's not overly exciting, but debt is the next port of call. And if you have some debt that you're paying off, then you're acting prudently. So you've built up your cash pool, you've begun to pay off debt. The next step is to think about the longer term. And you do that via investing, because if you just keep all of the money in cash, it will simply fall in value because the cash return is not as high as inflation. So it falls in real terms. Investing involves volatility. The market goes up and down, but over the longer term, it can generate real returns above inflation. And if you want to protect your money and grow it, that's what you need to do. Now, over the longer term, you have something called compound interest. That's a runaway effect where the growth that you receive combined with your original capital over time creates more and more wealth. That's where you can really become wealthy. And you can use appropriate tax shelters to do that. In the UK, we have the individual savings account, £20,000 a year. And that means that your investment is protected from all tax. And for the longer term investment, you have the pension. You put money into it and the government will also add money. So they will gross up any of your contributions by basic rate tax. And if you're a high rate taxpayer, you can reclaim that additional amount through self-assessment. So using both of these facilities is very important. Now, there will be some interesting content coming out in the coming months. If you like this channel, please do subscribe. Thank you.